Good day, everyone. Welcome to our lecture on understanding religious experiences. So, our objectives for today is first to understand the different philosophical methods used in studying religion and religious experiences, and second, to appreciate the distinctive character of empathy as a specific mode of understanding religious experiences. Our outline would consist of two parts. First, the general considerations and preliminary theories for religious experiences. And for part two, the empathy theory and the understanding of religious experiences. The present video lecture is gonna be focusing only on our first part. So let's go first to our terminologies. Methodology is the study of the methods that are used in order to gain knowledge about the subject matter of a particular discipline. It deals with the cognitive processes imposed by the problems arising from the nature of the subject matter. Method, on the other hand, refers to the right manner of proceeding within a given field of science. It is determined in relation to what is measured in the subject matter. So as you can see in the diagram, what we see in the scientific method is a step-by-step procedure. And our question here is how can we apply this scientific method in the study of religious experiences? So here we have a schematic diagram for understanding religious experiences. What we as students of religion have is only access to the external observable behavior. As investigators, we only see what is outside. But this behavior that we see actually point out to certain subjective states which correspond to certain states of the mind and feeling of the religious subject who encounters the numinous. So the numinous, as we have seen in the earlier lecture about religious experience, has two dimensions. First, a rational part that's understood by our mind, and the non-rational part, which is accessed through by what we call as the creature feeling. So in this scientific understanding of religious experiences, we have to take note of the fact that what we study in religion are facts that are subjective, thoughts, feelings, and intentions of people expressed in outward acts. Subjective states are what makes these given facts an act of worship and not mere movements. Subjective states take place in the human subject and are expressed in signs and symbols. In accordance with this, religious facts are subjective in the sense that they are the religious man's state of mind, way of looking at things, or interpretation. However, these facts are also objective in a sense. They are not the sole products of the human mind, but independent observers can verify them. Objectivity consists in letting the facts speak for themselves. Here, we must take note of the principle of epoche. It means suspension of preconceived judgment before the phenomenon in order to let it speak for itself. So to consider the ground on which religious beliefs are held does not mean that we have to pronounce judgments about their validity. Understanding a religious phenomena is achieved through the understanding of expressions. For example, sacrifice rituals in their essential meaning. It is through expressions that we understand other religious minds and enter them by rethinking, re-experiencing, empathy, or imaginative insight. Understanding is the grasping of some mental content to which an expression points. We do not enter into other people's minds by a mysterious process of gazing directly into them. We cannot reduce the meaning of religious facts to its psychological processes, though knowledge of it can help us in understanding the former. So understanding a religious phenomenon consists in empathy in another person's experiences, thoughts, emotions, etc. This act of understanding, however, does not consist in a reproductive experiencing of another person's experience, emotion, and thought. So we come into the different theories of understanding religious experiences. First, we have the imitative or reproductive understanding. Second is the theory of analogical inference. And third is the theory of imaginative insight or projective empathy. And lastly, we have to consider the general theory of empathy as given to us by the philosopher Edith Stein. But before we go directly into these theories, two principles must be kept in mind. First, that we have access to our own inner religious experiences, emotions, thoughts, and ideas in various situations. And second, that religious persons are all structured in the same way psychologically. So let's go into the first theory. The theory of imitation was proposed by the French sociologist and criminologist Gabriel Tarde and developed by the American James Mark Baldwin. Imitation is understood here as the repetition of the act of one person by another under the influence of suggestion. So according to them, the key to understanding society is a suggestion-imitation process. Tardy declares that all activities of men in society, from the satisfying of simple organic needs to the inventions of science and art, are in one way or another outcomes of the process of imitation. For Baldwin, imitation is the method of social organization, and all progress takes place through societies generalizing by imitation the inventions of individuals. Thus, we have a circular process. The individual develops intellectually and morally by imitating the mental attitudes and actions of those about him, while society changes through the continued imitation of the thought of some individual, a leader, or a genius. So, following this theory, an investigator can understand the religious experience of others if he is able to imitate the actions of the religious actor. This imitative action will bring the investigator to the underlying mental states of particular religious actions or expressions. Thus, the imitation of a person kneeling in church may help the investigator understand the accompanying religious mentality of a believer. But this theory also has its criticism. And accordingly, imitation does not guarantee access to the mental states of other persons. At most, it mimics the other's behavior in an external, superficial way. Similarity in behavior, thus, does not guarantee unity in thought or mental content. Thus, it does not guarantee access to the religious experiences of others. Let's proceed to the second theory, analogical inference. This theory claims that there are other people because their existence is inferred from the sense impressions that one receives from bodily parts, gestures, and expressions that resembles one's own. In this case, we understand others when we encounter or perceive such gestures or expressive movements similar to those which we experience in ourselves in consequence of our own individual self-activity. We infer a similar self-activity in others. So, application. The act of understanding another person's religious experience is not an act of mysterious or mystical insight based on some supernatural ability to penetrate the experiences of others. Instead, it is knowledge that is indirect, where inference about religious states is based on the observation of human statements, gestures, and other observable data. So the general form of the argument from analogical inference is this. Juan behaves in this manner. If I behave in this manner, I have this mental state, S. Therefore, Juan also possesses mental state S. However, if we claim to understand other religious experiences based on our own experience and behavior, would it not amount to subjectivism? Analogical inference does not allow us to access to the other in a manner that enables us to see the perspective of the other, since we are only focused on what we understand ourselves to be having when we do certain behavior. So our third theory is the theory of projective imagination. The theory of projective imagination holds that one is able to believe in the existence of others and the presence of minds in them, or to know that they are minds or thinking beings because it is possible to empathically project oneself into the physical manifestations evinced by the other. In this case, one therefore sends out his own awareness to inhabit another's body and imaginatively pretend to know, want, and feel whatever and however the other knows, wants, and feels. Applying this, it is essential that our own mental states, as known from our experience, be projected upon another person on the strength of all available information about that person. Our conclusion must be brought into agreement with the image we have of the mentality of the person in question so that one element is adjusted to the other. Through imagination, we also try to place ourselves in the position of the other person and create in us such mental states that would underlie the behavior similar to that of the other person. In religious experiences, this means achieving a space for interpreting the experiences of others based on what I imagine them to be. However, is this position also problematic? Max Scheler objects that this theory presupposes the existence of the other human being, which it was supposed to account for. What the theory establishes is mere blind belief and not a self-evident intuition or even a rational postulate. Moreover, this theory can never assure us of the legitimacy of the assumption itself, since it provides no way to check on whether the body on which I project my feelings is in fact a human body and whether the feelings I imagine to be his really are so. So just like analogical inference, this does not really give us access to the religious experiences of others, but merely on what we think others are experiencing. It cannot properly account for the existence of other selves or minds. For what is totally alien to our inner experience remains outside the scope of our understanding other people's minds. So that ends our part one.